So last week, I went to Austin Formula 1 Grand Prix, and not going to lie, it was a great experience seeing that sport live with a bunch of other fans from around the world, and to hear that engine sound that up close is something you just have to go and experience by yourself. So I researched the rules and policies of Circuit of the Americas in Texas and found out that they don't allow a telephoto lens longer than 10 inches, and we will talk about all of this later in this video because that is certainly not true. So to keep my setup really compact, I brought a prime lens which is a 85mm f1.8 from Sony, which crops in about 130mm with APS-C mode, and that worked out really well for me, as you can see here in these pictures. And in my opinion, I think it was a good amount of distance to cover enough of the track and the F1 cars itself. And for my setup, since I paired it with Sony a7C II, it made my setup really minimal and easy to carry all day around. Now the bag that I used to carry this camera setup and extra set of batteries is from Peak Design, and I just love this bag as I carry this everywhere I take my camera to streets. In my opinion, I think its minimal design and this rugged material gives you assurance that you can use this bag in any kind of weather conditions and you should be fine with all of your camera gears. Now let's talk about some of the accessories. Now the first one is a couple of extra batteries for your camera, as you may need more than one battery a day since you're shooting in burst mode most of the time, so I would highly recommend that as well. Now the second one is to get some sort of wrist belt, and in my case I have a Peak Design wristband which will assure you that you won't drop your expensive setup, and I highly recommend that because in my case there are a few moments when the place just got really crowded, so that belt really came in handy. The third one is the extra memory cards, because you won't even realize when you take 2000 shots already in just like an hour or something. And the last but not least is a ND filter, which you may need if you're trying to get a shot with motion blur around the car. And in my case, I have a Polar Pro variable ND filter from 2 to 5 stops, which I think it's a good amount of stops to cover the range. Now let's talk about the settings that I have in my camera. But before we begin, just so you know, I'm nowhere near any expert when it comes to motorsport photography, but I would like to share what worked for me in a general admission ticket at F1. So to begin with the file format, I've set up my camera to take raw, small compressed images, which kind of gave me enough room to manipulate the colors in the post and also keep the size files really small. So let's move on my shutter speed. So I've set my camera on a shutter speed priority, so I can set and change that quickly depending on what kind of shots do I want. And the shutter speed I was using majority of the time was about like 1/1250, which will give you like a clear shot without any kind of blur by your motion. And whenever I was trying to get a shot with the motion blur around the car, then I was using about 1/100 to 1/250, because if I would go lower than that, then I was getting a lot of blur on F1 car itself as well. And in terms of shooting mode, I was mainly on burst mode most of the time, while I was switching between high and high plus depending on different situations. So as you can see in this picture, when I was capturing this fighter jet shot, I had it on high plus so that I can get more options to choose the best shot in the post. And one thing that I realized during this trip, and I would also suggest you to always be ready with your camera, because a lot of things happen during the whole day of this F1 event, so you just never know what you see next on the track. Now let's talk about some of the things that I struggled. So the one thing that I struggled the most, depending on where I was sitting, was the autofocus on the car. Now in settings, I have set my autofocus priority from human to car, which worked really well, and the focus mode was mainly in the center, but due to high fencing at this event, a lot of pictures were focusing that over F1 cars, which was sometimes annoying, but you may not have that problem depending on your location of your sitting. So to solve that problem, I was manually focusing on the track, and I was keeping my camera really steady before all the car comes to that exact spot. And I already know that it's not ideal, but that was the best solution available for me at the time. But definitely let me know in the comments what else should I have tried. Now let's talk about some of the rules and regulations of the Circuit of the Americas. So before this event, I've read a bunch of Reddit articles, and it suggests that you should not bring a larger camera with telephoto lens, but no one cared what camera or lens I was taking in, as I saw plenty of people having a telephoto lens on them way larger than my setup. So do not worry about that at all, but just be mindful that you don't carry a huge 100 to 300mm lens, because that's going to make it too obvious and you might also ruin other people's experience of F1 as well. But at the same time, you should also keep in mind that you are not allowed to take any kind of tripod or monopod or any sort of stand for your camera setup, because A, that will come in everyone's way if you go in general admission ticket, and second, you might not just get any enough space to set up your camera as well. And just a disclaimer that all the rules and regulations that I'm talking here only applies to Austin Grand Prix, because I've never been to any other country or any other circuits, so you should do your own research for that too. But if you're thinking to bring a prime lens with you just like me, then I do highly recommend 85 or 90mm, as it will cover you majority of the time without carrying any huge telephoto lens all day. So if you have been to any F1 event recently, then definitely share your experience in the comments down below, and also let me know what camera or lens you brought with yourself, and also check out these other videos that I think you will also enjoy. And I'll see you in the next one.